Hey guys, Christian Brindle here. Thanks so much for taking the time to watch this video. Before we get into this video and this great interview that I had the chance to be able to do, I wanted to quickly talk to you guys about my favorite telemarketing lead company, and that is Lead Heroes. Guys, Lead Heroes has got you covered when it comes to your telemarketing leads, whether it be Medicare supplement leads, final expense leads, turn 65 leads. They've just got something for everybody. They have highly trained telemarketers that essentially can do a fantastic job and take the hard part out of prospecting for you by qualifying prospects ahead of time, making sure that they're interested, and essentially making sure that they really do want to talk to you ahead of time. It prevents you from having to make 100 phone calls just to get to that one person that might be interested. Anybody that's done telemarketing yourself knows what I mean by that. Just because you watch this video here today, guys, Lead Heroes has a multitude of different kinds of leads and also custom calling campaigns that you can order. There's a link down to their website down in the description, as well as a coupon code for 10% off all orders. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoy this video.
What's up, guys? Hey, this is Christian Brindle with Six Figure Medicare Agent. Hope this video finds you doing well. And today, I have a guest here with me today that it's long overdue that we do something together. I got Pete Fournier with me today. Pete, thank you for joining me. I mean, if you don't know who Pete is in the industry, you're just under a rock.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, Christian.
Hey, so you're everywhere in the industry, right? Like I see you all over the place, and it's a great privilege for me to be able to spend some time with you today and just kind of get to unpack your story a little bit. Before we got on, we were talking about, your first AEP. You've been a life annuity guy forever, right? From my understanding, and just got into the Medicare business. And let's first off talk to the audience about how your first AEP went.
Yeah, it was good. I actually broke down the actual numbers. To those of you that are selling life and annuities and you're not selling Medicare like this dude, get into it as fast as humanly possible. I've been in the industry just a little over 10 years, and my life renewals I thought were pretty awesome. They're not awesome compared to Medicare renewals. So, and it was I was intimidated by it, not gonna lie, in the beginning, because old dog can't learn new tricks or whatever. But once I went through some training, and obviously we leveraged some technology like Sunfire and CSG, dude, it was so easy. So I am now a fan of Medicare. But first AEP was around 50 to 60 split between MAPD and MedSup. I'm a big advanced market life guy. So a lot of my existing clients that I could practice on that were over 65 were SUP eligible. So I got to cut my teeth on that, and then ran some leads for MAPD. Did a little over a dozen PDPs, 9 HIP plans, 4 DVHs, close to 300K in annuities, and almost 10K in life. And that's during that 6-week period.
That's unbelievable. I mean, that's got to be the best first AEP of all time. You know what I mean? Like I don't know anybody that came right in and just, they're just crushing it like that. They're cross-selling like that. So, superbly like you. So props to you for that. Congratulations. And it's a great business to be in, right? I mean, if you're not doing it, it's something you should be doing.
Yeah, it really is awesome. And I mean, I saw some people I don't know if you know Julian Chambers, but shout out to him. I talked to him a few times because I think he went through his first one. He wrote 180 or something like that, MAPD. And I was like, bro, that's crazy. But it's interesting, watching the different Medicare experts like you, like Brock, Peter Walker, Tony Merwin, all these guys, right? The difference in the focus, but everybody is making a ton of money. So some are so MAPD dependent, which is cool. Some are so MedSup dependent, which is cool. I didn't know what the hell I was doing, so I just cross-sold as much as I could. But it's really neat to be able to compare and try to level up to where you guys are at in the industry. So it's fun running with you. I can't wait for next year.
Hey, well, appreciate that. I mean, I always say that, Justin is someone that I aspire to get to, because I'm not even close to where he is at. You know what I mean? I always think of it when it comes to Medicare, Justin's here and then everybody else is here. You know what I mean? Justin is just, he's like the Michael Jordan of the Medicare business,
Yeah, he's a freak.
he's ridiculous. But well, Pete, for anybody that's maybe not familiar with you, as ridiculous as that might seem, because you're everywhere, right? Like you retarget me all the
Appreciate
time.
it.
You know what I mean? On Facebook.
I gotta give a shout out to my marketing team, Done Digital, for that. That's awesome. I don't know anything about that stuff.
They're doing a great job.
But
They're
that's
doing a great
cool.
job, because I see you all over the place. Talk about a little bit of your story. You said you've been in the industry about 10 years now. What's the story for Pete? How did you get into the business? Let's start from the beginning.
Yeah, so started in college, my senior year of college, got licensed at 21. I'm now 31, turning 32, so a little over 10 years. One of my fraternity brothers was working at Northwestern Mutual, and I had another fraternity brother that was a little, maybe 2 or 3 years older than me, like my grandbig or my big, and he was with ING Financial, and they were both doing like really well, and I was like, I'm a better salesperson than both of you. So I got my license, and started at Northwestern, which was crazy. Like, the training was really good. However, the process, like new agents coming into the industry right now do not know how good they have it. I can't even imagine the agents selling in like the 70s and 80s. Cause like the training was, here's a phone book and write down 250 people that, and go try to sling them a policy. So, I was trying to close, my fraternity brothers on $15 a month term policies so I could make some money. And then after I graduated, went to a captive agency for a little while. They provided leads and stuff. So I was like, oh, that's cool. And then in 2012, I went independent. So I went to an IMO for a little while that eventually went out of business and got absorbed kind of by AmeriLife. And then I was at AmeriLife for a long, long time. And then found my home a little under 2 years ago at Innovative Financial Group. So I'm now president of sales for IFG. But like I said before, mainly advanced market stuff, at least for the latter portion of the decade that I was in. My primary focus is like higher net worth clients, IULs, mortgage protection, a little YFB, get a debt style policies, premium financing, annuities, all that good stuff. So I lean more towards the med sup side, just personally, because that's my experience. But that's a little bit about me and the background.
Well, awesome, man. I mean, that's a decorated resume, and congrats on all your success. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, one thing that's interesting, is if you look back on when you came into the industry, I'd say the industry probably looks a lot different than it does today. Would you say that's accurate?
Mm-hmm. It's wild, like just for the sheer fact of, and we can unpack this further, but I used to do a lot of travel trips, buy leads in random portions of the country. I grew up in New Jersey, and lead returns there were not so hot. I started my agency in Ohio. That was a little bit better, but like you had random states like Washington State, mail returns was unbelievable in like 2012, 2013 for whatever reason. Florida was good. Texas was good. So I used to fly all over the place, and I used to come home with paper apps. Like a lot of agents probably have never even written a paper app. And like God forbid, right? Yeah. And like, God forbid you lost like an amendment or like a tobacco user questionnaire or whatever, right? You had to like fax it to them. But I used to come home. I would try to go out as cheap as humanly possible. So I would just bring a carry-on, either a duffel bag or whatever. And usually if I wrote a ton of apps, I would check my bag and then carry on all the applications and put them above so I didn't lose any of them. But like that alone was a nightmare, like, a little under 10 years ago versus now, like everything is e-app. There's almost no reason to write paper, which is crazy.
Yeah. 100%. Like, and it's crazy. So I came into the industry in 2014. And
okay, yeah.
So like kind of like Justin, I started working with my dad. My dad had built a agency since I was a kid, here in Utah where I live, and so my dad was very old school. You know what I mean? Like he built his business in the 90s, early 2000s. You know what I mean? And so like he was very old school. So still did a lot of paper, right? And so I started doing paper. That's kind of how I started in the industry. So I did so many paper apps. I remember the first app I ever sold completely by myself without any help in 2014. It was a Plan F. Remember, Equitable Life and Casualty Plan F. And I missed like And it was like 45-minute drive away from the office. And I was just so stoked out of my mind. I was 20 years old when I sold it. And, I come back to the office. I'm like, I made a sale. Da, 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 da. And I come in and my dad's looking at it and he's like, you forgot the signature to authorize the bank draft. And I'm like, I had to go back and the lady wasn't home. So I'm like waiting in her driveway for her to come home.
I remember those days. It was terrible.
That's what you get with paper apps, right? You forget this, forget that.
That's for sure. But
Crazy.
the antithesis of that was like when I first started like dropping mortgage protection mail, let's say, right? There were some states where I was getting like a 3% return. Like it was like shooting fish in a barrel. Now, if you get 1%, you're like, hey,
We'll take
a pretty
that.
successful drop, right? Yeah, which is crazy. Like I know inflation obviously takes into consideration and the price of postage goes up, but like I remember when brand new MP leads were like $25. Now, if they're like 50, you're like, that's not too shabby, which is wild.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Like, I mean, I obviously was not in the business in 2010, 2011 or something around that time period, but I can imagine there's been a huge change in what's become available digitally. Have you seen that?
Yeah, like I don't want to say you didn't like have to be an expert in the products that you were selling, but even less than 10 years ago, the consumer was much less knowledgeable about a product. Like I remember one of the first houses I ever went into, and like all I had was 2 carriers when I went independent in 2012. I had Monumental Life, which is now Transamerica, right? Like it got absorbed or whatever. And I had Americo. And coming from like Northwestern Mutual or my captive, I'd never heard of term return of premium before, and neither did my clients. So I was selling that like hotcakes. Meanwhile, it was maybe not necessarily the best product in every situation, but I was like, listen, if you don't die, you get all your money back. And they were like, what? Now you say that to somebody and they're like, yeah, right. That's a UL or what I read about those on a blog post or whatever. But I think it's also our own fault because over the last 10 years, I've seen much more people like yourself, like Brock, like innovative, which is how I found them. I'm trying to do it too, making the industry more sexy, for lack of a better term, and putting all this information out there in the forms of podcasts like this, YouTube channels, blog posts, etc. So we're kind of making our prospects harder to deal with almost. They're getting smarter, so we need to get smarter, right?
Yeah.
But we're perpetuating it.
Yeah. I think that's so true. You know what I mean? And to unpack it a little bit further, it's like, I think it's definitely a double-edged sword because like, I always tell people, like when I make a podcast, and we've made 233 direct-to-consumer podcasts, like
wow,
for Medicare, and I mean we're the only office that does that with that type of focus that I know of, and it's awesome because it's grown so much. It's taken years, but it's grown to the point where we get consistent client flow of it, and it's just it's basically a referral on steroids because they know what they want. They don't have to really be presented that much. And so it's good from that perspective, but it's probably, I definitely see the negative of it because now the information is available like at their fingertips. And, maybe some people I'm sure feel like they don't need us as much.
Right. Or they tend, like, I'm sure you see it in the Medicare space too, maybe a little bit more than life or annuities, is like the self-enrollment, right? People can almost like just call the carrier and be like, I want a G, or I want this HMO plan that I saw on television. And they're like, yep, no problem. Right. As opposed to going through a third party.
Yeah. 100%. And like, you have sites like eHealth now, like eHealth has this quota. They probably spent, a couple $1 million on it or something like that. But, and I use it all the time, right? If I'm selling in a market, if I'm selling Medicare Advantage in a market that I'm not familiar with, I will use that quota. I'll type in the zip code and be like, oh, it looks like, Humana's here. This is there. You know what I mean? I'll just kind of quickly run through it. But like consumers can check their drugs on there. I probably shouldn't be saying this, but the consumers They can check their prescriptions on there. They can check their doctors on there. We're talking about Medicare Advantage, and they can enroll themselves right from the platform. Like it's ridiculous.
That's crazy.
Like it's almost like they can do, and they also have the summary of benefits, evidence of coverage, everything just like PDF right there attached with the plan. It's just like I think the more we see things like that, because I don't know of any other organization that's doing it quite like they are, but like I think the more organizations we see like that, I think it's going to become more and more important for people like you and people like me that are building brands for ourselves for companies to survive. Do you think that's true?
Oh, 100%. Like you have to be out there as kind of I mean, it's an overused term, but it's true. Like the thought leader for whatever product or service you're selling. Like I even went so far as to, even though I'm in Wilmington now with Innovative, like my hometown's in Jersey, I write articles for local magazines for my hometown, like just to do that in terms of grassroots marketing, to make sure that people trust me when either I cold call them or, you know, they fill out a lead or whatever the case may be. I think it's super important to create that brand development for yourself. And you don't have to be a master at everything, like pick your focus, right?
Yeah.
But that weeds out the yous, the me's, the Justins of the world, right, et cetera, from the 100,000 licensed agents that are across the country. I forget the statistic, but I think there's like 15,000 or something like that licensed agents in the state of New Jersey. It might be more or less. I don't know. It's some baffling number.
Good Lord.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I'm sure most of them aren't active, but like the barrier for entry of our industry is so freaking low. I mean, you need a 70 on you basically need a C minus on a test one time, and then a little bit of money to join, right? Whatever organization it is. So I think building up that brand and being known as the thought leader is super, super important.
Yeah, I think so too. And it's so crazy because, like, you know, referencing back how, you know, the industry being so different 10 years ago, like maybe when you came into the business, like 10 years ago, I mean, even when I started, you know, maybe 4 or 5 years later, like I built my business on cold calling people for med subs.
Yeah.
You know, that 90 days out, you know, that were turning 65. That's how I built my business. I mean, and I know there's people that still do that very successfully today, but I think that window, I mean, I don't want to say that it's shrinking, but I could guarantee that it's harder to do that today than it was 10 years ago.
Super hard. I mean, there's all kinds of tricks and stuff that you have to use, like, you know, people signing up for Google Voice to mask their number or get the same zip code that they're cold calling on or whatever. But I mean, I think I've seen you say it in the threads. I say it all the time. There's literally no reason to cold call anymore. Like none. If a brand new agent is coming to either Innovative or maybe I'm just consulting them or they're doing a coaching call and stuff, and they're like, listen, I have no money, whatever. You're either selling something like a couch or a watch or whatever to get your first lead pack, or I guarantee you, if I log into your social media, you probably have 1,000 friends. Bother them.
Yeah.
Right. There's no reason to call out of a phone book anymore. That's such a waste of time.
Yeah. And like one thing that baffles me is like agents that are actively building a book. And like you said, they'll have, you know, even 800 friends on Facebook, right? Or 1,000 or 2,000 or something like that. And like, they won't actively post about it. They'll post about, you know, their weekend, you know, or some stupid thing like that. And like, I can't tell you how many clients I've gotten with people that, like, you know, even if they're not Medicare eligible, they'll have me do the plan for their mom or their grandmother or something.
Oh yeah.
Like that. Just people that the last person I would ever think, just because I'm willing to post and I'm willing to stand up on a chair and be like, look at me, this is what I do, you know, and it's just people fall into your lap by doing that. Yeah.
A lot of agents seem to have this weird, like, separation of church and state where they're like, well, I have a business page for that. Dude, no one's following your business page. Get the hell out of here, you know? or if you want to increase your following on your business page, like cross-post it to your personal. You probably have way more friends than you do followers, especially out the gate, right? Same thing on Instagram, TikTok, whatever social media you're on. Like, shout it from the mountaintops this is what you do. Because if you're not that confident to post that you're an insurance agent or Medicare specialist or whatever, like, what do you look like in a presentation? You know?
Yeah. Yeah. And like,
probably super meek.
To take this a step further too, I'll encounter a lot of agents that like, they wonder why they don't get more, just low hanging fruit or easy gimmes, lay down sales. And then I'll take a look at what they have going on digitally. Their Facebook accounts on private, for one, their settings are set to private. And then I take a look deeper and I'll look at what they're posting, and like they're posting like photos of them bong hitting it. You know what I mean? I'm like, what? Like, the fuck are you doing? You know what I mean? I'm like, it's crazy. Like one of my aunts told me a couple of years ago, she's like, it'd be nice sometimes if you posted things just for your family, and you can make another Facebook account for your business. And I just told her, I was like the fact that you have to, the fact that you felt the need to bring this to my attention tells me that you're actively thinking about what I'm posting.
You're doing something correctly. Yeah, exactly. I'll post my family, and I'll also put a subtitle that says, hey, they're insured.
Yeah. And insured well with that.
Yeah, exactly.
But like the other thing too is, like they don't have a My Google page set up, my business page on Google set up. Like, they don't have anything like that. I'm like, how are people supposed to find you? Like, nowadays people want to look you up and see, if you're a serial killer or something before they buy from you.
Yeah. And things like SEO and stuff, and this is way above my pay grade because I'm no marketing specialist, but that stuff takes time. So if you're not starting like yesterday, you're never going to catch up, Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. I agree with that. Like, agents are funny, but I mean, so a question I would have for you, Pete, to kind of segue into that, like you starting when you did, if you had to start from scratch today, where would your attention be? Like, where would your focus be today that might be different than when you started?
Oh, that's a great question. So first of all, I would definitely be cross-selling Medicare initially. I think even though I don't necessarily love the final expense market, it's just not my personal preference. That has to be the lowest barrier to entry for an agent. However, it's also the easiest cross-selling opportunity. Like, even if it's not my personal preference, when a new agent comes on board with us, I tell them, listen, start out with final expense, then you're going to cross-sell Medicare, then you're going to cross-sell annuities because it's all in the same portfolio. I'm not trying to learn term and premium financing and Medicare and annuities and all this stuff in my head's like full of nonsense. I think I was very caught up on that initially, especially with a firm like Northwestern or the New York Lifes or whatever. They kind of want you to be like that certified financial planner eventually. So you're talking about stock accounts, you're talking about IRAs, you're talking about group medical. And I know all that stuff now, but I shouldn't have been so focused on learning everything in the beginning. I should have just picked a demographic of lead, for lack of a better term, to go after, or prospect, and do that. And then for the advanced market stuff, maybe practice on my friends and family until I gained up enough knowledge to be able to sell it to the masses. But that would have drastically increased my income initially. So that's one. Number two is not hiring by the masses. When I left my captive and I went independent, I was really good at selling the dream without living it. Like, I was making decent money, but I was spending it like a moron. I came right in and right out. And I hired a couple bad apples, and they slaughtered me with roll-up debt on the life insurance side very early on. And it took me about 18 months or so and I joke about it all the time, like flipping Pokemon cards and shoes and all kinds of nonsense to try to dig out of that debt. Building an agency is great. And if you're out here listening and you're like a year in and you're like, I want to go crazy on recruiting, just don't do that. Like, be selfish for your first year, maybe even 2 years, build up that renewal base to get yourself a baseline, and then start bringing on agents, because you don't want someone else to ruin your income.
I'm so glad you said that, because it drives me nuts, okay. This has been a big challenge. I feel like, in the business, I feel like the culture, with the Facebook, I think there's a lot of good things and bad things that, in terms of like the Facebook groups and the communities and things like that. I think they have, 100 positives and maybe 10 negatives, but I think one of those 10 negatives is sometimes the emphasis gets pushed on recruiting, and agents come in that really don't know what they're doing and they're trying to recruit. And then we have this never ending cycle of blind leading the blind, right? It's just, and that drives me nuts. Like I always tell people, like, first of all, if you're not comfortably living off of your income, don't recruit. It's going to cost you time. It's going to cost you money in the short term. And like we've had a lot of agents recently too with us the last year or two, where they'll come in, they'll like sell 20 policies. They'll sell 20, 30 apps, they'll start building up a client base. They'll start doing pretty good, getting some momentum. And then they want to ruin it by recruiting.
Right. Exactly.
And so like, Christian, I learned everything I need to learn. I'm good. Let's hire some people.
Time to build a team. I'm like, no, time to build a team. What are you talking about? Like, I mean, I couldn't agree more with you. Like I built my book of business for probably 4 or 5 years before I even had a contract agent, before I had one contract under me. And
that's huge.
Maybe I'm just, biased towards that because that's how I did it. But like, I can't imagine dealing with everything I deal with today with agents when I was new, because my business is built on the foundation of my book, probably similar to yours. And
right.
I mean, my book would not be what it is today if I was babysitting all the time.
Yep, absolutely. And I'm sure the retention is better on the Medicare side, especially with subs. Like people don't cancel those. It's unbelievable. Yeah, but like on the life side, the agent, and I forget the statistic, I want to say it's like 68% or something nationally of the average insurance agent retains their book by 68%. So you got 32% of your business constantly falling off, and you're going out there to rewrite it. And that people can't mentally like be that strong. So you see a lot of agents fall off, and boom, that's how you get hit with roll-up debt. So like that, you got to hire slow and fire fast. And that's something I learned by unfortunately living like the problems of doing it the opposite way, so I'm a little jaded in that regard, but focus on yourself and your personal pen and your income. It's so easy to make a ton of money by just going to work yourself. Yeah. And after you do it, then replicate, Yeah.
I mean, like, have something that you can look back on and be like, okay, this is what I built. Let me teach you how to do it. Like it's kind of a hard, I don't even know I don't know where these people find these agents too. Like, if you have 30 clients, like, I feel like recruiting and finding a quality agent is hard. Like who is contracting with these agents that have 30 clients? Like I wouldn't feel comfortable with that if I was a new agent. Like I always wonder, like, where did you find this person?
I know some of the, oh man, this falls into that 10% of negatives on the Facebook groups. Yeah. Like I try not to troll anybody or, be respectful, but occasionally you see a post and you're like, what are you doing? It says like, line cook at Olive Garden, and you're trying to recruit somebody into your insurance organization. Like, what, are you even in the business yet? I don't understand what's going on. Like, I hate that stuff. And it unfortunately, it's people like that like give IMOs and stuff like that a bad name. Like we're not giant recruiting machines, that's not the point.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so funny you say that. So I took a trip in December to Virginia to work with a team of agents of ours. And, it was a situation like that, where there's one person that started first. She wrote like 20 apps, and then she wants to recruit like 10 people. And so it's just, and the whole thing was like a huge headache for me. It was just horrific. It ended up being like, she wanted me to train all of her agents, and she makes the override and does nothing. And she ended up leaving the organization like after my
Sounds
visit.
About right.
Which it's just fine. I mean, I've actually had a lot more peace since then, so I'm okay with it. But anyway, I was spending some time with them. We're in a coffee shop getting coffee to talk with all the agents. And, someone overhears that I'm from Utah. She walks up, she's like, "Oh, you're from Utah? I'm moving to Utah next week." And we start, I'm like, "Oh, small world." We just start having a conversation. And this agent pops up behind my shoulder and she's like, "You need a job?" She's like, "He's a great recruiter in the insurance business. Go get your insurance license and you can work with him." And I'm just like, shut up. I'm like, "No, you can't come work with me." I'm like, I'm like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "This is a stranger off the street. What are you doing?"
It's really tough. And like being out there too, like developing your brand and stuff, pretty consistently, you have random people or sometimes even friends of yours, maybe from high school or something, and they reach out. And I mean, I try to steer them a little bit away from it. One, it's a nice takeaway, like to see if they really want it. But two, I mean, this industry is not for everybody, like
Right.
Not even close. So you kind of don't want to, in the recruiting game, like ruin someone's life. Be like, "Yeah, just quit your full-time job and like, come on, jump in with both feet." Like,
let's
what?
go. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It really is. Like, I remember when I was first starting out, my dad is kind of like half retired now, but he was kind of slowing down when I started. And, but my first year or so, he was trying to build a downline, but my dad's just not a recruiter. He's not a great recruiter. And, mainly because it seemed like to me, every time that he would sit down with someone and someone would come into the office to talk to him, it almost sounded like he was trying to talk them out of it. You know what I mean? And I never understood that. And I was like, why are you doing this? I'm like, "You're making it sound horrible." I'm like, "I love this career." I'm like, why are you paint it like that? And then once I started working with agents, I got it. Then I understood a little bit
Right.
more. I mean, not that I think his approach was necessarily the right one if you're recruiting, but I get why he took that approach, because he's probably thinking of all the work and pain in the butt this agent's going to be. And he's like trying to talk him out of it, if you will.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm sure he realizes too, like you have to hire maybe 20 to get one. That's awesome. Right. That's the Christians or the Brocks or whatever of the world. It's a painstaking process,
Yeah, 100%. Pete, I want to be respectful of your time. I had one last question I wanted to run by you.
Sure.
So if you could go back and start from scratch and either start on the financial side with annuities and life and all that stuff, or maybe start from scratch with Medicare, if you had to start with one, where would you start? I think I know the answer, but I'm just curious what you'd say. Now that you've had a taste of the Medicare.
So the only thing that I will say about starting up front on Medicare is it really would have to depend on where I chose to hang my hat. Like if they had the resources and everything like we do, like you guys do, I think Medicare first. The reason I say life first, and I like this sucks because it's not even an answer to your question, but I'm going to play devil's advocate on both sides because that's what I like to do during my days. Medicare, if you have the resources. However, I would argue that if you don't have things like Sunfire or CSG or whatever quoting tools are out there, it might be tough to make a livable income in the immediate future, right, off of the Medicare apps. Because I know if I go out and write a life policy, I can make $2 or $3 grand like this. Whereas Medicare, it's a slow play, right? So that would be the one negative, if there is one. The other one would be Medicare it's very service related. You're not really pushing, right, to make that sale. It's, hey, you got option A, B, or C. We know you have to pick one. Which one works better for you? Or your doctor's not in this network. He is in this network. You want to switch or whatever. Life insurance is like you are sometimes shoving it down their throat. So I am happy in the aspect that I started with life because Medicare came very easy because I was like trying to sell it and you don't need to.
Yeah.
So that helped in terms of the cross sell because I was like, oh my God, these MAPDs, it's like order taking. You need a HIP plan, right?
Yeah.
And like, you know how do you do that because you're used to selling insurance. But all in all, I would from day one, I would have started on the Medicare train in some aspect, whether it was completely only Medicare. I probably would have learned final expense at least starting out, but I would have been Medicare focused at least as a loss leader, if that's even a term to use, because it gets you in the house. You're basically reimbursing yourself for the lead if you're working leads, right? 9 times out of 10, probably, as long as you're doing the right thing for people. And then you have the opportunity to upsell later. So
yeah,
I know that was like a way, that was like a politician's answer to
yeah. Ask the question.
your question.
Ask the question. Ask the question you wish you were asked, not the one.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just kidding.
Exactly.
But that was a great answer though. And I think there's a lot of insight there. And I think it's really true. You know, I think different lines have their different positives and negatives and, you know, upfalls. So Pete, you know, you're pretty closely tied with IFG.
Mm-hmm.
How can people get in touch with you guys if they watch this?
Yeah.
And they just identified with you?
Yep, totally. You can follow me anywhere on social media. I'm usually at Peter J. Fournier on social media. Visit PeteFournier.com or shoot me an email. I mean, I'm pretty accessible. Pete at PeteFournier.com is my email. If you just want to chat, you have questions, you need help, you know, reach out. I do have a coaching and consulting service, mostly on the life, group benefits and annuity space. I'm not going to be coaching anybody on Medicare anytime soon, but if you need help on life, annuities, or group benefits, definitely hit me up and we'll have a coaching session. But pretty accessible. So reach out, comment on the YouTube page. I'm pretty sure I'm subscribed to Christian, so if I see your comment, I'll reach out to you too.
Well, great. Thank you for your time. I know you're a very busy person, and so thank you for taking some time to kind of share some really good insights, some good value here today, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, man, I appreciate the invite. This was awesome.
All right, guys. Well, thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video with Pete, let us know. Like he said, drop a comment on the comment section, like the video, subscribe, hit the bell, do everything, because it just doesn't feel like it means enough unless you do it all. Until next time, guys, thanks so much for watching. We'll be back with future 6-figure Medicare Agent content. Take care.